on Freedom, it's our time with a roundup of the day's top news. My name is Mikhail Baranov, hello, and next I'll tell you about the most important stories. Ukraine's air defense forces neutralized 110 aerial targets belonging to the Russian occupiers on the night of January 26th. The Russian Federation's army launched 138 attack drones at peaceful Ukrainian cities, 90 of which were Shaheeds. The air attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft and missile troops, electronic warfare and drone units, as well as mobile fire teams. Hits were recorded at 11 locations. Seven civilians were injured as a result of Russian shelling in the Sumy region. According to local authorities, among the wounded are 2 children, aged 8 and 11. All necessary services are involved in dealing with the aftermath. The victims are receiving the necessary assistance. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, as a result of strikes by the Russian army, an apartment building, an administrative building, and a lyceum were damaged. 1 person was injured. According to local authorities, the Russian Federation army attacked the region with various types of drones and also shelled it with artillery. Kherson was once again under attack by the Russian army. As a result of shelling by the Russian occupiers, 1 person was killed. According to local authorities, the enemy once again cynically struck critical and social infrastructure, as well as residential neighborhoods. The occupiers destroyed a cell tower and a gas pipeline. An apartment building, 4 private houses, and one of the city's educational institutions were also damaged. The occupiers deliberately targeted it with artillery. It sustained serious damage. The walls are shattered, windows blown out, and classrooms destroyed. Rescue workers have already started repairs and restoration work. Russian forces shelled a residential area in Zaporizhzhia using multiple rocket launch systems. The explosions damaged 10 private houses. No residents were injured, but in one of the yards, pets were killed. More on the aftermath of the attack in our report.
The Russian army attacked the city at around 4 a.m. A missile from the Russian occupiers pierced the roof of Svetlana's house. All the windows were blown out. Shrapnel killed 2 dogs that were hiding in their kennels in the yard.
The dogs were killed.
The dogs were killed. One was hit by shrapnel, the other was struck as well. The roof, too, right in the middle, was pierced. Now we'll see what can be done there.
Another missile hit the neighboring house. Miraculously, no one was hurt, but the windows are shattered, the roof. A car was damaged. Sex.
Cassettes landed here. The roof was completely shattered, and the car's radiator was severely destroyed. The front windshield, the rear, and the entire side. Sharp shrapnel cut right through it.
Rescue workers are on site after the Russian strikes. They've already boarded up the broken windows with wooden panels, and the damaged roofs are being covered with special plastic sheeting.
Here, the roof was damaged by a cluster munition. Now, we'll securely cover up the hole with heavy-duty reinforced plastic sheeting to at least prevent and halt the main leaks. This is what we can do now.
Over the past 10 days, Russian troops have intensified shelling of residential areas. Zaporizhzhia. Attacks occur several times a day. During this time, more than 120 houses were damaged. Of these, 19 multi-story buildings require major repairs following the shelling. Oleg Prutikin, Boris Yakovenko from Zaporizhzhia for the Freedom TV channel. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, held a special conference call regarding the energy situation in the regions. The head of state emphasized that he listened to reports from relevant specialists. He instructed the prime minister to analyze the possibilities of purchasing equipment for alternative electricity generation and heating.
First and foremost, this concerns Kyiv and the region, Kharkiv and the region, as well as Chernihiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, and Zaporizhzhia regions. More attention and time in the discussion was devoted to Kyiv. This is an extremely difficult situation. More than 1,200 apartment buildings in the city are still without heating. We discussed with local leaders and officials how to provide help as quickly as possible. So far, none of the deadlines that have been mentioned can be considered satisfactory. We need to act faster. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
100 million Czech kronas, which is more than 4 million euros, were raised in the Czech Republic in just 4 days for generators and backup batteries for Kyiv. The target amount kept changing because of the large influx of donations. The organizers of the fundraiser are now gradually transferring the funds to Ukrainian foundations, which are purchasing generators and batteries for hospitals, schools, and kindergartens. Let me remind you, earlier, a fundraiser was held in Poland to support Kyiv. Warmth from Poland. In just 6 days, they raised 5 million zlotys there, which is more than 1 million euros. The Center for the Protection of Critical Underwater Infrastructure will be established in the Gulf of Finland. The Finnish border guard, together with other Baltic Sea countries and the European Commission, is creating a maritime surveillance center. As is known, the Baltic Sea region has been on high alert after a series of attacks on power lines. Heating, communication lines, and gas pipelines have been under threat since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The European Union is officially rejecting Russian gas. Today, all 27 EU member states adopted a regulation on the gradual cessation of imports of Russian pipeline and liquefied natural gas. The ban will take effect 6 weeks after the regulation comes into force. On the front lines, Pokrovska remains one of the hottest spots. The Russian army is ramping up pressure and trying to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian armed forces, pulling in reserves and changing tactics. This was reported by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Alexander Syrsky. He emphasized that he continues to work in the Pokrovsk and Ocheredin directions, where the enemy is trying to force the Ukrainian armed forces into intense combat. According to the commander-in-chief, the main task of the defense forces is to inflict maximum losses on the enemy and reduce their offensive potential.
We are paying special attention to strengthening our drone systems units. First and foremost, this means using strike drones to target Russian occupiers, as well as developing logistics with the involvement of robotic systems. The nature of war is changing, and we are changing our approaches to waging it. The scaling up of modern technologies has a direct impact on the effectiveness of combat operations and helps save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Kupiansk-Kharkiv region, Ukrainian troops are finishing clearing the city of Russians. Special operations forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine carried out a successful raid in the central district of the city. They reported that a group of Russian servicemen decided to set up positions in a destroyed supermarket and a nearby residential building. As a result of the clearing operation, some of the invaders were eliminated while others were taken prisoner. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, since the beginning of the day, Ukrainian troops have repelled 138 Russian assaults along the entire front line, and almost a third of them were in the Pokrovsk direction. Russian forces launched 14 more attacks in the Huliai-Pole sector and 12 in the Liman sector. There were 9 attacks each in the southern Slobozhanske and Kostiantinovka directions, as well as 7 on the Kupiansk bridgehead. The most difficult situation is in the Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. FPV drone operators and artillerymen are working precisely against the enemy. As military experts note, the offensive actions of the Russian occupiers fit into 2 concepts.
The first is in accordance with the illegally amended constitution of the Russian Federation, the seizure of 4 regions. This explains precisely the reason why the fighting is at its most intense. In the Donetsk region, we have seen an increase in military activity in Zaporizhzhia, and similarly across the Kherson strategic direction. Given that the Dnipro is helping us, the high right bank, there are some isolated attempts in the area of the Antonivsky Bridge, but nothing more than that. The second concept is the creation of so-called sanitary buffer zones. In the Kharkiv region, where they started this kind of activity, now also in the Sumy region, and they've declared intentions for the Chernihiv region as well. However, they don't have enough forces for all of this.
Another 1,020 Russian occupiers were eliminated by Ukraine's defense forces over the past day. Thus, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the total combat losses of the Russian Federation's army in Ukraine have already exceeded 1,235,000 soldiers. In addition, the day before, Ukrainian forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 32 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launch systems, and 148 units of Russian automotive and special equipment. Last night, Ukraine's defense forces attacked an oil refinery in Slovyansk in the Kuban region of Krasnodar Krai, Russian Federation. This information was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. They note that strikes by attack UAVs on the plant's territory and explosions near the target have been recorded. According to preliminary information, elements of the primary oil processing unit were hit. After the drone attack, a fire broke out at the refinery. In addition, the General Staff reported strikes on several Russian targets in temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories.
Warehouses supplying material and technical support to the occupying units in the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia regions were also hit. Furthermore, in order to weaken the enemy's offensive capabilities, strikes were carried out on a UAV command post near Velika Novosilka in the Donetsk region. The number of enemy personnel killed and wounded in the areas of Yunikivka, Sumy region, and Kolesnikivka, Kharkiv region is being clarified. This is according to a report from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook.
The bilateral document with the United States on security guarantees for Ukraine is 100% ready. This was stated by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at a press conference in Vilnius. According to him, the Ukrainian side is waiting for notification from its partners about the date and place of the signing of the agreement. After that, the document must be ratified by the US Congress and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine.
Specific security guarantees for Ukraine make it possible to set a concrete date for the end of the war. And this is a war both in Ukraine and the end of a potential war in Europe, because these will be security guarantees for Ukraine, which is part of the future European Union. For us, security guarantees, first and foremost, are bilateral security guarantees with the United States of America. The document is 100% ready. We are waiting for our partners to be ready for the date and place when we will sign it.
Ukraine will not give up its territory to Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky also stated this in Vilnius. According to him, the United States of America is currently trying to find compromises. To this end, meetings are being held in a trilateral format.
Our position on our territory and the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which must be respected, everyone knows our position. We're fighting for our state, for what is ours. We are not fighting on the territory of another country, so what questions could there be for us? Yes, these are two fundamentally different positions, the Ukrainian and the Russian. The Americans are trying to find a compromise. We are willing to engage in trilateral talks.